My name is Allison Mitchell, and I'm 34 years old. I never imagined that waking up from spinal surgery would be the least painful part of my hospital stay. The car accident had nearly killed me, and I was grateful to be alive despite the agony. My husband Jason had been so supportive, and my younger sister Claire visited daily. But as I gazed out my hospital window that evening, what I saw shattered my world more completely than the crash ever could. If you've ever had your trust broken by the people closest to you, drop a like and subscribe. My story might help you feel less alone in your darkest hour. Before the accident, I had what most would consider a perfect life. I ran a successful physical therapy practice in downtown Seattle, specializing in sports rehabilitation. My clinic had grown from a small office to a respected establishment with 3 other therapists working under me. I took pride in helping athletes and accident victims regain their strength and mobility. Ironic, considering my current situation. Jason and I had been married for 8 years. We met at a friend's wedding. I was the maid of honor, and he was the charming investment banker who asked me to dance. After a whirlwind romance, we married and bought a beautiful craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood. With his career at a prestigious firm and my thriving practice, we enjoyed financial stability and what I thought was emotional security. For the past 2 years, we've been trying to have a baby. The journey had been difficult. 2 miscarriages and countless negative pregnancy tests had taken their toll. Still, we remained hopeful, and Jason had always been my rock through the disappointments. At least that's what I believed. Claire, my younger sister by 6 years, was my only sibling and polar opposite. Where I was structured and disciplined, Claire was spontaneous and creative. She worked as a freelance graphic designer and lived in a small apartment downtown filled with half-finished canvases and eclectic furniture. Despite our differences, we'd always been close. When I was recovering from my second miscarriage, Claire stayed with us for a week, cooking meals and making me laugh when I thought I'd never smile again. After my accident, she didn't hesitate to offer help. "I'll stay at your place and help Jason keep things running," she insisted. "You just focus on getting better." I was grateful for her generosity, especially knowing how much Jason struggled with household tasks. My husband was brilliant with financial portfolios, but somehow incapable of operating our washing machine. And worst of all, spinal trauma that required fusion surgery. My hospital stay stretched into weeks. The spinal fusion was successful but left me with limited mobility. I needed assistance for almost everything, from sitting up to using the bathroom. The pain was constant, only dulled by medication that left me foggy and disoriented. The doctors were optimistic about my recovery, but warned it would be a long process. 6 months of intensive physical therapy, they said, before I could hope to return to normal activities. Throughout those first 2 weeks, Jason visited daily. He'd arrive after work with small gifts: my favorite lavender hand cream, audiobooks, soft socks for my cold feet. He'd sit beside my bed, holding my hand and telling me about his day or reading to me when the pain medication made it hard to focus my eyes. He seemed devoted, and I felt fortunate despite my injuries. Claire visited almost as frequently, often coming with Jason after they'd both finished work. She brought fresh clothes, took my laundry home, and kept me updated on how she was maintaining our house. "The plants are still alive," she'd joke, knowing my concern for my extensive indoor garden. "And I'm making sure Jason eats something other than takeout." Looking back, there were signs I should have noticed. The way they arrived together more often than not. The private whispers in the hallway when they thought I was sleeping. How Claire would sometimes wear subtle hints of Jason's favorite cologne, something I initially attributed to her proximity to his things at our house. But pain and medication clouded my perception, and gratitude blinded me to the truth unfolding right before my eyes. The nurses often commented on how lucky I was. "Your husband and sister are so attentive," one said while checking my vitals. "Many patients don't have such dedicated support." I could sit up for longer periods and had even taken a few steps with a walker under the supervision of my physical therapist. With each small victory came hope that I would eventually reclaim my independence and return to the life I'd built. But as I became more lucid, I also grew more perceptive. I noticed how Jason sometimes seemed distracted during his visits, checking his phone more frequently than usual. How Claire's eyes would dart away when I asked specific questions about their days. Little did I know that clarity would bring not just physical healing, but a painful revelation that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, and my future. The day everything changed started like any other during my hospital stay. It was a Friday, exactly 17 days after my surgery. The doctors had further reduced my pain medication, and for the first time since the accident, I felt like my head was truly clear. The constant fog that had surrounded my thoughts had lifted somewhat, leaving behind only the physical pain that I was slowly learning to manage. Jason and Claire had visited together that morning. Jason brought fresh flowers, lilies, my favorite, and Claire carried a tote bag filled with magazines and a new pair of pajamas. They sat on either side of my bed, sharing stories about a neighbor's noisy renovation project and a funny encounter with our mail carrier. Everything seemed normal, except for a certain restraint in their laughter, a careful distance they maintained from each other in my presence. "How are things at home?" I asked, watching their expressions carefully. "Everything's fine," Jason replied quickly. "Claire's been a huge help." Claire nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. "The house is standing, and I haven't killed your fern collection yet, promising to return in the evening." Claire squeezed my hand and said she'd visit again tomorrow. I watched them walk out, noticing how they carefully maintained space between them until they thought they were out of my sight. After they left, I had my physical therapy session, painful but productive. My therapist, Derek, was encouraging about my progress. "You're doing great, Allison. Better than expected for this stage." His words boosted my spirits, and I returned to my room feeling more positive than I had in weeks. The afternoon stretched before me, empty and quiet. I read for a while, had a light lunch, and then decided to sit in the chair by the window. The nurses encouraged movement when possible, and the change of position helped alleviate the stiffness in my back. From my third-floor window, partially obscured by a delivery van but unmistakable with its distinctive rims that he was so proud of, I hadn't expected to see him until later, and I wondered if he'd come early to surprise me. Then I saw them both, Jason and Claire, walking toward his car. They weren't coming from the hospital entrance, but from the direction of the small park adjacent to the parking lot. But I told myself I was overreacting. They were family now. It was natural they'd grown closer while supporting each other through my accident. Then it happened. As Claire turned to walk toward her own car parked nearby, Jason caught her wrist, pulling her back to him. In one fluid motion, he cupped her face with both hands and kissed her. Not a friendly peck, not a brotherly gesture, but a passionate, intimate kiss that spoke of desire and familiarity. Claire didn't pull away. Instead, her arms wrapped around his neck, her body melting into his with practiced ease. The kiss lingered, deepened, clearly not their first. My heart thundered in my chest. A sharp pain shot through my spine as I jerked forward in shock, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional agony tearing through me. I couldn't breathe. The world narrowed to that single image, my husband and my sister locked in a lover's embrace, betraying me while I lay recovering from near-fatal injuries. They finally separated, exchanging a few more words. Jason brushed Claire's hair from her face with tender familiarity. They looked around, checking if anyone had seen, but never thought to look up at the hospital windows. Claire walked to her car while Jason remained by his, checking his phone. After Claire drove away, he straightened his tie and headed toward the hospital entrance. I barely had time to process what I'd witnessed before I needed to decide how to respond. Confront him immediately? Pretend I'd seen nothing and gather more information? In my vulnerable state, completely dependent on others for care, I chose the latter. I couldn't risk a confrontation that might leave me without support during my recovery. With trembling hands, I maneuvered myself back to the bed and tried to compose myself. Just breathing required conscious effort. My mind raced through memories. Jason arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a paper bag from the hospital cafe. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, smiling as if nothing was wrong. "I brought you those chocolate chip cookies you like from the cafeteria. The ones with the sea salt on top." "That's thoughtful," I managed, studying his face. Was there a trace of guilt in his eyes? A hint of Claire's lipstick on his mouth? Or was I imagining things now that I knew what to look for? "How was your day?" he asked, settling into the chair beside my bed. The picture of a devoted husband. Enlightening, I said carefully, watching for a reaction. There was none. He stayed for an hour talking about his work day, asking about my therapy session, completely at ease while my world collapsed around me. Either he was an accomplished liar, or their betrayal had become so normalized that he felt no guilt at all. He nodded sympathetically. Get some rest. I'll be back tomorrow morning. He leaned down to kiss me, and it took every ounce of self-control not to flinch away from his touch. After he left, interspersed with happy memories from our marriage and sisterhood that now felt tainted beyond repair. Clarifying anger. By morning I had a plan. Claire would visit alone today. Jason had mentioned a work meeting. I would confront her first, gauge her reaction. Claire arrived at 10:30 the next morning, carrying a brown paper bag and a coffee cup. Her smile seemed forced, her cheerfulness too deliberate. Had she always been this transparent? She placed the items on my tray table and settled into the chair beside my bed. How are you feeling today? I studied her face, the face I'd known my entire life. My little sister, who I'd taught to ride a bike, who I'd consoled through her first heartbreak, who was now sleeping with my husband. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, deeper than any I'd sustained in the accident. Where were you yesterday evening? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Claire blinked, momentarily thrown by the direct question. Home. Working on a design project. Why? The lie came so easily to her that it made me wonder how many others she'd told me. That's interesting. I didn't want to disturb you. Another lie. I nodded slowly, as if accepting her explanation. And did you see Jason while you were here? A flicker of panic crossed her features. Briefly. He was leaving as I arrived. We just said hello in passing. I let silence stretch between us, watching discomfort bloom on her face. Finally, I couldn't maintain the charade any longer. I saw you with Jason yesterday, Claire. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I saw you kiss him in the parking lot, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. And it wasn't a friendly peck between in-laws. Claire's face crumpled. She opened her mouth as if to deny it, then closed it again. Tears filled her eyes. Allison, don't. I cut her off sharply. Don't you dare cry. You don't get to be the victim here. It's not what you think, she whispered, the most cliché response possible. Really? It just happened, ally. We didn't plan it. We've both been so worried about you spending time together supporting each other. When? I demanded. When did it start? She looked down at her hands. About 2 weeks after your accident. Jason was a mess and I was trying to help him cope. One night we were both emotional, had a few glasses of wine. She trailed off as if this explained everything. 2 weeks. I repeated incredulously. I was still in the ICU, Claire. I was fighting for my life while you were what? Comforting my husband with your body. It wasn't like that, she protested. We were both lonely and scared. It started as emotional support and just evolved. Evolved? I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. How convenient for both of you. Please try to understand, Claire begged. We never meant to hurt you. We've both been so lost without you and… Stop. My voice cut through her excuses like a blade. Do not try to make this my fault. Help me understand how my sister and husband falling into bed together, while I'm hospitalized, could possibly be anything but a deliberate choice to betray me. We care about you, she insisted, tears streaming down her face. We both love you so much. The laugh that escaped me was harsh even to my own ears. Is that what you tell yourselves? That this is somehow compatible with loving me? Ally, please. She reached for my hand, but I yanked it away. We can work through this. When you're better. When I'm better? I interrupted, my voice rising. You think there's a future where I forgive this? Where we all laugh about the time my sister slept with my husband while I was recovering from surgery? I know it's awful, Claire sobbed. I know we've hurt you terribly. But you and I are sisters. We're family. That has to count for something. It counted for nothing when you decided to sleep with Jason, I said coldly. I'm so sorry, ally. I never meant for this to happen. Please don't cut me out of your life. I'll end things with Jason, I swear. How noble of you, I said sarcastically. Too late. Now leave before I call security. She hesitated, opened her mouth to speak again, then seemed to think better of it. With one last anguished look, she turned and fled the room. Her sobs audible even after she disappeared down the hallway. The confrontation had drawn attention. A nurse appeared in my doorway moments later, concern etched on her face. Ms. Mitchell? Is everything all right? Your heart monitor is showing elevated vitals. I wiped away angry tears. I'm fine. Just a family disagreement. Is there anything I can do? She asked kindly. No, I said, trying to regain my composure. I just need to be alone right now. After she left, I stared out the window, my mind racing. Claire's confession confirmed what I'd seen. But her timeline didn't match the familiarity I'd witnessed in their kiss. This wasn't a recent emotional mistake. It was an established affair. And now I had to prepare to confront Jason. He would be visiting that evening, unaware that I'd discovered their secret. I spent the afternoon mentally rehearsing what I would say, how I would respond to the excuses and justifications I knew would come. I requested a shower from the nursing staff, wanting to feel as strong and put together as possible for the confrontation ahead. As I sat in my hospital bed waiting for Jason to arrive, I found myself remembering moments from our marriage with new suspicion. The late nights at work. The weekends when he was mysteriously unreachable. The times Claire would cancel plans with me because she was busy with a project. Had they been seeing each other even before my accident? How much of my life had been a lie? By the time Jason's familiar footsteps sounded in the hallway, my grief had crystallized into something harder and more resolute. The woman who waited for him was not the same one who had woken up in this hospital bed just weeks ago. That woman was gone, shattered not by the accident but by betrayal. Jason entered my room at 6:15 p.m., carrying a bouquet of pink peonies. His smile seemed genuine, his demeanor relaxed, the perfect picture of a devoted husband visiting his recovering wife. If I hadn't seen him with my own eyes, I might have continued believing the facade. Hey beautiful, he greeted me, leaning down to kiss my cheek. It took everything in me not to recoil from his touch. These just came in at the florist, and I remembered how much you love them. They're lovely, I replied mechanically, watching as he arranged them in the empty vase on my nightstand. How was physical therapy today? He asked, settling into the chair beside my bed. Making progress? I ignored his question. Have you spoken to Claire today? A flicker of something, concern? Fear? Crossed his face before he composed himself. No, why? Is everything okay? The casual lie infuriated me. Had they already synchronized their stories? Planned how to handle me if I became suspicious? That's interesting, I said, keeping my voice steady, because she was here this morning. We had quite the conversation. Jason's expression remained carefully neutral, but I noticed his hand tighten on the armrest. Oh, what about? I think you know exactly what about, Jason. I held his gaze unflinchingly. I saw you yesterday, both of you, in the parking lot. For a moment he seemed confused. Then realization dawned and his face went slack. Allison, don't bother denying it, I interrupted. Claire already confirmed everything. Jason closed his eyes briefly, a muscle working in his jaw. When he looked at me again, his expression had changed entirely. The concerned husband was gone, replaced by someone colder, more calculating. This isn't how I wanted you to find out, he said finally. A harsh laugh escaped me. How considerate. Was there a better way for me to discover my husband and sister betraying me? I was going to tell you when you were stronger, he insisted. The doctors said additional stress could compromise your recovery. How thoughtful of you to consider my health while sleeping with my sister, I said bitterly. Why, Jason? Why her? Why now? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's complicated. Uncomplicated for me. Claire and we connected during this crisis. It's not that simple, he argued, a defensive edge entering his voice. Our marriage was struggling long before your accident, Allison. You know that. The accusation caught me off guard. What are you talking about? Come on, he scoffed. The last year has been nothing but arguments about fertility treatments and your work schedule. We barely talked unless it was about ovulation cycles or doctor appointments. His words stung precisely because they held a grain of truth. Our efforts to conceive had been all-consuming, and the disappointments had taken their toll. But to use that as justification for infidelity felt like a second betrayal. So your solution was to sleep with my sister? I demanded. Nothing about betraying your injured wife could possibly feel right, Jason. He leaned forward, his expression hardening. I wasn't going to tell you like this. But since we're being honest, I want a divorce. The words hit me like a physical blow. Despite what I'd seen, some part of me had still hoped there might be an explanation, a way forward. But Jason wasn't even pretending to be sorry. How long? I asked, my voice barely audible. How long has this really been going on? Claire said 2 weeks after my accident. But that kiss I saw wasn't new. Jason hesitated, and I knew I'd caught him in another lie. Does it matter? It matters to me. He sighed. 6 months. The room seemed to tilt around me. And Claire and I ended up talking for hours on the patio. One thing led to another. My birthday party. The celebration I'd planned so carefully, where I'd been surrounded by friends and family, all while my husband and sister were beginning their betrayal under my own roof. The realization made me physically ill. So all this time, your devotion during my recovery, the daily visits, the gifts, it was all an act. Not entirely, he said, having the audacity to look offended. I do care about you, Allison. I wanted you to recover. I'm not in love with you anymore. And you're in love with Claire? The question felt like swallowing glass. I think I could be, he admitted. We were going to wait until you were better to tell you. We didn't want to hurt you while you were vulnerable. How noble, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Waiting until I could stand on my own 2 feet before pushing me down again. That's not fair, Jason protested. We were trying to be considerate. Considerate. My voice rose sharply. You were sleeping with my sister for months, including while I was in the hospital. And you think waiting to dump me makes you considerate? Lower your voice, he warned, glancing toward the door. Why? Afraid someone will hear what kind of man you really are. I was shouting now, past caring who heard. Afraid they'll know you're sleeping with your wife's sister, while she recovers from spinal surgery? You're being hysterical, he said dismissively. Get out of my life. Allison, be reasonable. We need to discuss practical matters, the house, finances. We'll discuss it through lawyers, I snapped. I'm done talking to you. You're overreacting, he insisted. Once you've calmed down. Overreacting. I grabbed the vase of peonies from my nightstand and hurled it at him. Miss? Shattering against the wall and sending water and flowers across the floor. You destroy our marriage, betray me with my own sister, and I'm overreacting? Me half out of bed and trembling with rage. Jason standing with his hands raised defensively. What's going on here? The security guard demanded. Nothing, Jason said quickly. Just a misunderstanding. My wife is upset. I want him out, I interrupted, pointing at Jason. I don't want him in my room. I don't want him visiting me again. The nurse approached me with concern. Ms. Mitchell, please try to calm down. Your blood pressure. I'll calm down when he leaves, I insisted, tears streaming down my face. The security guard turned to Jason. Sir, I think it's best if you step out. Jason looked at me, a mixture of frustration and pity on his face. This isn't over, Allison. We still need to talk. We have nothing to say to each other, I replied coldly. Contact my lawyer. With a resigned sigh, Jason left, the security guard following to ensure he exited the building. The nurse helped me back into bed, checking my vitals and murmuring soothing words I barely heard. Would you like something to help you relax? She asked gently. I can speak to the doctor about a mild sedative. I nodded, suddenly exhausted beyond words. The confrontation had drained what little strength I had, leaving me hollow and aching in ways that had nothing to do with my physical injuries. After the nurse left, I stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. 6 months. They had been betraying me for 6 months. All those late nights I'd attributed to work, the weekends when Claire was mysteriously unavailable to meet for coffee, which had seemed challenging but manageable with their help, now loomed as an insurmountable mountain I would have to climb alone. For the first time since the accident, I found myself wondering if it might have been easier not to have survived at all. The thought terrified me with its seductive simplicity. No pain, no betrayal, no uncertain future to face alone. The doctor came in to check on me, concerned about my emotional state. After a brief examination, he prescribed a mild sedative to help me sleep. Physical healing requires emotional rest too, he explained kindly. Try not to worry about anything else tonight. As the medication began to take effect, a young nurse named Hannah stayed with me, holding my hand in compassionate silence. I'm supposed to be off shift, she admitted quietly, but I didn't want to leave you alone right now. Her simple kindness, from a virtual stranger, brought fresh tears to my eyes. As consciousness began to slip away, I wondered how I would find the strength to rebuild my life from these shattered pieces. The road to physical recovery suddenly seemed like the easiest of the challenges that lay ahead. I woke the next morning to find Hannah, the night nurse, still in my room, updating my chart. Hannah finished her notes and sat in the chair beside my bed. I don't normally do this, but I went through something similar 3 years ago. Not exactly the same, but my fiancé and best friend. How did you get through it? One day at a time. And I stopped trying to do it alone. She hesitated, then added, You mentioned yesterday that your husband and sister were your primary support system. Is there someone else you could call? A friend, colleague, anyone? I thought about it, feeling ashamed at how isolated I'd become. My friendship circle had shrunk considerably in recent years, largely because Jason had never enjoyed socializing much, and my focus on work and trying to conceive had consumed most of my free time. Maybe Megan, I said finally. We were close in college and stayed friends, though we haven't talked much lately. Hannah encouraged me to reach out, and before I could overthink it, I sent Megan a text. Asterisk, something terrible has happened. I'm in the hospital after an accident, and I could really use a friend right now. No pressure if you're busy. Asterisk. To my surprise and relief, Megan responded almost immediately. Asterisk, I'm ally. What hospital? I'm coming right now. Asterisk. 2 hours later, Megan burst into my room like a force of nature, her red hair flying and green eyes wide with concern. We hadn't seen each other in nearly a year. But she hugged me carefully around my monitors and tubes as if no time had passed. What happened? She demanded. Your text scared me half to death. The simple question unleashed everything: the accident, the surgery, and finally the devastating betrayal. Megan listened without interruption, her expression shifting from shock to outrage. Those absolute bastards, she said when I finished. I never liked Jason much, but this? And your own sister? That's a special kind of evil. Her straightforward anger on my behalf was oddly comforting after Jason's gaslighting and Claire's tearful justifications. Megan didn't try to find explanations or silver linings. She simply validated that what they had done was inexcusable. What can I do? She asked, practical as always. What do you need right now? You start by not doing this alone, Megan said firmly. I have a spare bedroom that's yours for as long as you need it. And my cousin Sarah is a divorce attorney, one of those scary ones that makes men cry in depositions. I'm calling her right now. Before I could protest, Megan was on the phone with her cousin, explaining my situation in blunt terms. By the end of the day, Sarah had agreed to meet with me at the hospital the following morning. Meanwhile, I asked to speak with my doctor about my recovery plan. Dr. Patel arrived in the afternoon, reviewing my chart with a thoughtful expression. Physically, you're progressing well, he said. But I understand there have been some personal complications. You could say that, I replied dryly. He nodded. Your original discharge plan assumed you'd be returning home with family support. Given the changed circumstances, we need to reevaluate. We discussed options, including extended hospital stay followed by inpatient rehabilitation. But when I mentioned Megan's offer, Dr. Patel seemed cautiously optimistic. If your friend's home can be adapted for your needs, a first-floor bedroom, accessible bathroom, And if we arrange for home healthcare visits, that might be a viable alternative to inpatient rehab. Megan, who had stepped out during my medical consultation, returned with coffee and an air of determination. When I explained Dr. Patel's requirements, she waved away my concerns. My condo has an elevator, the doorways are wide enough for a wheelchair, and the guest bathroom already has grab bars from when my mom stayed with me after her knee replacement. We can make this work. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. While Megan made calls and arrangements, I contacted my office manager, Denise, to explain my extended absence. I'd been so focused on my physical recovery, and then the betrayal that I'd neglected to properly address my business needs. Denise was horrified by my situation but reassuring about the practice. She helped me make calls to freeze accounts and credit cards, working methodically through a checklist of protective measures. By the end of her visit, all further communication should go through Sarah Goldstein at Goldstein and Meyer Law. Asterisk. His response came quickly. Asterisk, this is unnecessary. We could work this out amicably. Asterisk. I didn't dignify it with a reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to Sarah and then blocked his number. Claire had tried calling several times since our confrontation, leaving tearful voicemails begging for forgiveness and understanding. I blocked her number too, along with her email and social media accounts. The clean digital break was strangely empowering, like cutting away diseased tissue to allow healing to begin. The next few days brought a flurry of activity. Megan took time off work to prepare her apartment for my arrival, purchasing a specialized mattress overlay and renting medical equipment. Hannah, who had become both my medical advocate and friend, helped coordinate with the home healthcare agency that would continue my care after discharge. Dr. Patel adjusted my physical therapy schedule. Spite is a powerful motivator, I replied through gritted teeth as I completed another painful exercise. The support I received from virtual strangers, Hannah, my medical team, even Sarah. Mutual friends sent confused messages, having heard conflicting stories from Jason and Claire. Some expressed shock and support for me. Others seemed to accept Jason's narrative that our marriage had been failing long before his relationship with Claire. The casual ease with which some friends believed the worst of me without question was another painful revelation. A week after discovering the affair, I was ready for discharge. Megan arrived with comfortable clothes and a determined smile, helping me navigate the wheelchair to her waiting car. As we left the hospital, the place where my life had both been saved and irrevocably changed, I felt a complex mixture of fear and resolve. Ready for phase 2? Megan asked as she carefully helped me into the passenger seat. I looked back at the hospital window, the same one through which I'd witnessed the betrayal that had collapsed my world. No, I admitted honestly, but I'm going anyway. My final day at the hospital brought an unexpected complication, but had returned home once it was clear I was stable. What are you doing here? My mother rushed to my side, embracing me carefully. Claire called us, she explained, her voice tight with emotion. She said there was a situation we needed to know about. My father remained in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. At 65, he had always avoided emotional confrontations, preferring to let my mother handle family conflicts. Did she tell you what kind of situation? I asked, feeling a surge of anger that Claire had involved our parents without my consent. My mother exchanged a glance with my father. She said there had been a misunderstanding between you, her, and Jason. That things had gotten complicated while she was helping during your recovery. A misunderstanding, I repeated flatly. Is that what she called it? Honey, we don't know the details. These were my parents, the people who had taught me right from wrong, who had raised both Claire and me with the same values and expectations. How could I tell them what their younger daughter had done? But they deserved the truth. Taking a deep breath, I told them everything: the accident, the recovery, and the devastating discovery I'd made through my hospital window. I described Claire's tearful confession and Jason's cold justifications. I explained my plans to move in with Megan and file for divorce. As I spoke, my mother's expression crumbled, tears streaming down her face. My father's complexion turned increasingly red, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. 6 months, he finally burst out. They've been carrying on behind your back for 6 months? While you were trying for a baby? While you were in the hospital? I nodded, his outrage somehow validating my own. According to Jason, yes. I can't believe this, my mother whispered. Not Claire. She wouldn't do this to you. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, Mom, I said gently. She admitted everything. She's living in my house with my husband right now. My father began pacing the small room. I'm going over there. Right now. I want to hear her try to explain this to my face. Dad, don't, I pleaded. It won't change anything. I'm moving on. I have a plan. A plan? My mother asked, wiping her tears. What plan? I explained about Megan, the apartment, the home healthcare arrangements, and Sarah, the divorce attorney. My parents listened with growing concern. You can't possibly manage your recovery in a friend's apartment, my mother insisted. You need to come home to Arizona with us. We'll take care of you. The offer was tempting, to retreat to my childhood home, to be cared for by people who loved me unconditionally. But I knew it wasn't the right choice. I appreciate that, Mom. But I need to stay here. My practice is here. My life is here. I can't just run away. My parents were still trying to convince me when another knock interrupted us. This time, it was Claire who stood in the doorway, her face pale and tear-stained. The room went silent. My father turned his back to her, unable to even look at his younger daughter. My mother made a small, I thought we should all talk together. As a family. We're not a family anymore, I said. You destroyed that when you slept with my husband. Allison, please, she begged. I know what I did was unforgivable, but then why are you here asking for forgiveness? My father interrupted, turning to face her with fury in his eyes. If you know it's unforgivable, why come at all? Claire flinched at his tone. Dad, don't dad me right now, he snapped. I don't even recognize you. The daughter I raised would never do something so callous, so selfish. My mother, always the peacemaker, seemed torn between her daughters. Claire, I don't understand how you could do this. To your own sister. I don't expect you to understand, Claire said, wiping at her tears. I don't understand it myself. But I love Allison. She's my sister. I can't lose her over one mistake. One mistake. I echoed incredulously. You slept with my husband for 6 months. That's not one mistake. That's thousands of deliberate choices to betray me, day after day. I know, she whispered. You didn't value our relationship then. Don't pretend to value it now. My father put his arm around my shoulders, a silent show of support. My mother looked between us, her expression anguished. Claire, she said finally, I think you should go. This isn't helping anyone right now. Claire's face crumpled at our mother's dismissal. Mom, please. Go, Claire, my father said firmly. We'll talk later. But right now you need to leave. With one last pleading look at me, Claire turned and left, her shoulders shaking with sobs. The silence she left behind was heavy with grief and broken trust. My mother sank into the chair beside my bed, looking suddenly older. How did we get here? She wondered aloud. How did our family fall apart like this? This isn't your fault, I assured her, reaching for her hand. Claire made her choices. Jason made his choices. Neither of you raised her to think this was acceptable. My father nodded grimly. You're right about that. But what happens now? With the family, I mean. It was the question I'd been avoiding. I don't know, I admitted. I can't imagine ever trusting Claire again, or having any kind of relationship with her. But I don't expect you both to cut her off. She's still your daughter. You're both our daughters, my mother said firmly. But right now you're the one who needs our support. Claire will have to face the consequences of her actions. We spent the rest of the afternoon finalizing my discharge plans. My parents were reluctant to accept my decision to stay with Megan rather than return to Arizona with them, but eventually agreed when they met her and saw the preparations she'd made. We'll stay in town for a while, my father insisted. Get a hotel near Megan's place. Just until we're sure you're settled. Their support meant everything, but the family fracture was painfully evident. My mother kept checking her phone, torn between her concern for me and her worry for Claire. My father avoided mentioning Claire entirely, channeling his anger into practical tasks like arranging for my belongings to be retrieved from my house. That evening, as the discharge paperwork was being processed, Hannah came by one last time to say goodbye. "Remember what I told you," she said, hugging me carefully. "One day at a time. And you're stronger than you think." Leaving the hospital was both terrifying and liberating. Megan had brought comfortable leggings and an oversized sweater that fit over my back brace, and my father pushed my wheelchair while my mother carried my belongings. The transition from patient to whatever I was now felt abrupt and disorienting. "Ready?" Megan asked as she pulled her car up to the hospital entrance. No, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to leave the structured environment of the hospital for the uncertainties of recovery. I wasn't ready to face a future so different from the one I'd planned. I wasn't ready to rebuild my life from scratch while still healing from physical trauma. But I nodded anyway. As I'll ever be. My father helped me into the passenger seat with gentle hands that belied his usual gruffness. My mother fussed with my seatbelt and the angle of my seat. Their love surrounded me, a buffer against the world that waited beyond the hospital gates. As Megan drove us toward her apartment, my phone buzzed with a text. Despite having blocked both Jason and Claire, messages occasionally came through from different numbers. This one was from Jason. I moved most of your clothes and personal items to your office. The rest of the property division will have to wait until the lawyers sort it out. Claire and I are staying at the house for now. The casual confirmation that they were indeed living together in the home Jason and I had built sent a fresh wave of pain through me. I showed the message to my father, who took the phone from my hand with a scowl. "I'll give this to your attorney," he said, tucking it into his pocket. "You don't need to see any more messages from him." Megan's apartment was on the third floor of a modern building with an elevator, as promised. She had transformed her guest room into a makeshift recovery suite, with the rented hospital bed positioned to look out the large window, a small table within easy reach, and framed photos of happier times, carefully selected to include no images of Jason or Claire. "It's not much," she apologized, "but we can make it more comfortable as we go." "It's perfect," I assured her, emotion thick in my throat. "I don't know how to thank you for all this." "You don't have to thank me," she said simply. "This is what friends do." That night, after my parents left for their hotel, and the home health nurse completed her first visit, I lay in the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Megan's apartment. Everything about my life had changed in the span of a week. My marriage was over. My relationship with my sister was destroyed. My home was no longer my own. My body was still healing from catastrophic injuries. And yet somehow I was still here. Still breathing. Still fighting. The realization was both terrifying and strangely empowering. If I could survive this, perhaps the worst confluence of personal and physical trauma possible, I could survive anything. The walls were still mostly bare, the furniture minimal, but it was mine. A fresh start. My physical recovery had progressed better than even Dr. Patel had predicted. After 6 weeks at Megan's apartment with daily home healthcare visits and intensive physical therapy, I had graduated to a cane and moved into my own place. The divorce proceedings were well underway, though far from simple. Jason had initially tried to claim that my medical expenses had depleted our joint assets, justifying a larger share of our property for himself. Sarah had shut that down immediately, threatening to depose Claire about the timeline of their affair and introduce evidence of their pre-accident relationship that would paint Jason in a decidedly unfavorable light to any judge. He'd backed down quickly after that, and we were now negotiating a more equitable division. Ironically, the house that had once represented our future together had become a point of contention. I had no desire to return to it, too many memories, too much pain associated with those walls, but I refused to simply sign it over to Jason and Claire. In the end, we agreed it would be sold. My father's birthday had necessitated a carefully orchestrated family dinner, with Claire arriving for dessert after I'd had time with our parents. The meeting had been civil but strained, with Claire's attempts at normal conversation falling flat against the weight of her betrayal. I had managed polite small talk for our parents' sake, but felt nothing for the sister I had once loved so dearly. The woman across the table was a stranger wearing a familiar face. "You look good," she had ventured at one point. "The new haircut suits you." "Thanks," I had replied, touching the short bob I'd adopted for practical reasons during recovery. "It's easier to manage." That was the extent of our personal exchange. When she asked if we could meet sometime to talk, I had simply said, "I don't think that would be helpful for either of us right now." The hurt in her eyes registered distantly, like observing someone else's pain from a great distance. My social circle had shifted dramatically in the aftermath of the betrayal. Some mutual friends had chosen sides. People I hadn't been particularly close to stepping up with consistent support. Derek, my hospital physical therapist, had become an unexpected friend. After I graduated from his care, he'd asked if I'd like to grab coffee sometime. Initially hesitant about any new relationship, even platonic, I had finally agreed. Our coffee meetings became a regular occurrence, evolving into a friendship based on mutual respect and shared interests beyond my recovery. He never pushed for more, seeming to understand instinctively that I needed time to heal emotionally as well as physically. "Healing isn't linear," he told me during one of our coffee dates. "Some days you'll feel almost normal, and others you'll feel like you've gone backward. That's true for bodies and hearts." Or catch the scent of Claire's distinctive perfume on a passing stranger. The triggers became less frequent with time, but never disappeared entirely. My therapy practice had welcomed me back with open arms. Initially, I worked just 1 day a week, focusing on administrative tasks and consultations rather than hands-on therapy. As my strength returned, I gradually increased my hours, finding that helping others with their physical recovery provided perspective on my own healing journey. One patient in particular, a young woman recovering from a serious motorcycle accident, had connected deeply with my experience. "How do you do it?" she asked during a particularly difficult session. "How do you keep going when everything falls apart at once?" I considered her question carefully. "You focus on what you can control," I said finally. "You can't control what happened to you, or what other people did, but you can control how you respond, and the person you choose to be moving forward." The words, spoken to comfort her, resonated with my own experience. In the darkest moments after discovering Jason and Claire's betrayal, I had felt utterly powerless. But with each decision I made, hiring Sarah, moving to Megan's, returning to work, finding my own apartment, I had reclaimed a piece of my agency, rebuilding my sense of self-choice by choice. I was learning to recognize the warning signs I had missed in my marriage with Jason. The small betrayals that had preceded the ultimate deception, the half-truths, the emotional distance, the subtle prioritizing of his needs over mine. I had ignored these red flags, making excuses and focusing on the image of our relationship rather than its reality. It was a mistake I vowed not to repeat. Perhaps the most important lesson had been the value of independence within relationships. In my marriage, I had gradually surrendered pieces of myself, friendships, hobbies, dreams, in service to our partnership. The process had been so incremental that I hadn't noticed how much I had lost until everything collapsed. Now, as I rebuilt my life, I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been submerged for years. I found unexpected joy in small indulgences that would have seemed frivolous before. A watercolor class on Saturday mornings, a subscription to a monthly book delivery service, conversations with strangers at my favorite coffee shop. My world, which had narrowed to the dimensions of my marriage and sister relationship, gradually expanded again, filled with new possibilities and connections. One bright autumn morning, 6 months to the day after leaving the hospital, I drove to Alki Beach and parked near the water. With my cane for support, I made my way to the shoreline, breathing in the salt air as the gentle waves lapped at the sand. It was a modest victory, walking unassisted on uneven terrain, but it symbolized how far I had come, both physically and emotionally. Standing there, watching ferries cross the Sound against the backdrop of the Seattle skyline, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since before the accident. The pain of betrayal hadn't disappeared. I doubted it ever would completely, but it no longer defined me. It had become just one chapter in my story, not the whole book. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Derek. Asterisk, still on for coffee tomorrow? Found a new place with great scones. Asterisk. I smiled as I typed my reply, Asterisk absolutely. Save me a blueberry one. Asterisk. The future remained uncertain in many ways. Would I ever trust enough to love again? Could my family heal the rifts created by Claire's betrayal? Would I continue to progress physically? Perhaps even return to full-time work? I didn't have answers to these questions yet, but for the first time in months the uncertainty didn't frighten me. What I had learned through this ordeal was that sometimes losing what you thought you needed makes room for what you truly deserve. The husband I had fought to hold on to had never been worthy of that loyalty. The sister I had trusted implicitly had revealed a capacity for selfishness I couldn't have imagined. Their betrayal had shattered my world, but in rebuilding, I had created something stronger, truer to myself. As I turned to walk back to my car, I noticed a woman watching me from a nearby bench. For a moment I thought it might be Claire, but as she stood and walked in the opposite direction, I realized she was a stranger. Just another person enjoying the beach on a beautiful day. The brief moment of mistaken identity passed without the usual surge of emotion. Progress, not perfection. Life would continue to present challenges. There would be difficult days ahead. Finalizing the divorce, navigating family gatherings, facing new limitations from my injuries. But I had survived the worst storm of my life and emerged not unscathed but undefeated. Whatever came next, I would face it with the resilience I had discovered in myself during these dark months. If you've ever faced betrayal by those closest to you, I hope my story offers some comfort. The pain may feel unbearable now, but trust that it won't always be so intense. Surround yourself with people who truly support you. Focus on what you can control, and be patient with your healing process. Have you experienced a betrayal that changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our struggles makes them a little easier to bear. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. And remember, your worth isn't diminished by someone else's inability to see it. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey of healing.